Today on The State of Us, what does it take to buy a home for the first time or to rent an apartment in America today? Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined, of course, today by the one and only, the friendly redneck liberal and senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance L. Jackson. So today, we're looking at two different pieces from the Wall Street Journal, and they're intertwined because, interestingly enough, what's happening in the housing market has an impact on the rental market. And if anybody's been, driving or buying food or really just living in American society today, we know that prices and the economy are doing some interesting things. So how does that translate into the housing market? What are people paying for their first homes? If you're looking to buy one, what should you be on the lookout for? And what is that doing to wealth generation in America? And then also, how is it affecting the rental market and the ability of people to find the type of apartment or living situation that they're looking for? So there's a lot to talk about. But before we dive in, Lance, do we have a word of the day?
We do, and
didn't lose this one.
No.
Okay. Found it.
We are all
latched onto it.
We are all free zone over this talking about houses. Either that or the air conditioning is up a little high in here. Frison, F-R-I-S-S-O-N, 2 syllables. It's a noun. It comes from the French. It means a shudder or shiver as of excitement, fear, or pleasure. Free zone. Interesting. I thought it was an interesting word.
Okay.
Yep. Thought it was frizzen, right? F-R-I-S-S-O-N. But when you look at the pronunciation guide, it's F-R-E with the little sign over the E to make it a long E sound. And then S-O-N. With a long vowel sound over the O, with actually the accent should be on the second syllable. So it's frizon, frizon, a shudder or shiver of excitement, fear, or pleasure. And I'm that about today's topic.
Yeah.
Talking about houses.
Yeah.
Because
you have a house.
I have a house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good.
And I'm in here, and
and you've had an apartment.
And I've had an apartment. Yes.
Many years ago.
Let's see, 2 apartments.
Yeah. I gotcha. And you were probably living in those apartments. The last time you were in an apartment was before I was born, probably, right? So
that would be true. Probably it was 80. Yep. 85, okay. 86.
All right. Showing that age.
Misspoke. Don't want anybody come and fact check me. I've actually lived in 3 apartments, 2 in Urbana.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Lived in one for a year and did not like that landlord. So I moved to another one until it was time to try to buy a house. And I can feel people's pain, when they talk about it's hard to come up with the down payment and overbuying, spending more, and all of a sudden it's kind of tough to make the payments the first 2 or 3 years, and but then it gets easier. And now I'm to the point where the house is just about paid off, and the question becomes, are we moving or not? And I see the articles like, I don't mind maybe selling the house and moving, but daggone, what are you going to get once you leave?
Yeah, where are you going to live?
It's a scary thought. It's not like, oh yeah, I'll sell my house and look, I'm going to get a lot of money. Well, where am I going to go and how much am I going to have to pay for it? So am I better just to sit here in this house that we've lived in for so long?
The subheading for this Wall Street Journal article, which is linked at thestateofus.org, says buyers look further afield, turn to family for down payments, and spend over budget as the median price tops $400,000 for the first time. Quote, it's just so ridiculous and disheartening. So as far as some statistics here about what exactly is happening, the median existing home sale price in May rose 14.8% to more than $400,000, a record even when adjusting earlier prices for inflation. So this isn't just something you can just chalk up and say, oh, well, inflation accounts for this, and therefore we're breaking records. Well, inflation certainly plays in, but it actually breaks records even when you adjust for inflation. So that back in my day thing, right? Well,
that sends a free zone through my body.
Okay.
It really does. It's like, wow. Even with inflation, it's still higher.
The number of homes for sale remains well below normal levels for this time of year, forcing buyers to compete in bidding wars and waive typical protections in their offers. The average rate on a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage surged to 5.81% this week from 3.1% at the end of 2021, according to mortgage finance company Freddie Mac. That has pushed up buyers' expected monthly payments by hundreds of dollars a month, and rent prices are climbing too, making it more difficult for prospective buyers to save for a down payment. Because we're going to talk about rentals later in the show, but I think this part's important because, as Lance talked about, obviously if you don't yet own a home, you probably are renting somewhere. If rent prices are going up as well, that is less of your income that can be stashed away to save up for the down payment. And often you're really not going to find, anybody doing less than a 20% down payment. And some are doing bigger than that because it's becoming this consumer sort of war, right? Of what's the best offer you can make.
Well, you have this budget, I hope, right? And you're having to overspend on your budget, and then interest rates go up. And so now your house payment, your mortgage is higher than you anticipated or budgeted. And so the only way to get that payment down is one of two, right? Either interest rates drop, which we're not seeing happen, or you put more money down so you finance less money to get your monthly payment within your budget means, so that you have to put more money down up front. So it's an interesting scenario. I've never really lived in a time when there was a bidding war for houses, and they say that's starting to slow down a little bit now, depending on the market. But, it only takes two to have a bidding war. That's what I, wanted to comment on from the article. It said, well, instead of 20 or 30 couples or people bidding on this property, we only have 4 or 5. And it just came to mind, we only need 2 for a bidding war. If 2 people really, really want something, the price can go up immensely. So does it matter whether it's 20 people looking at it or 4 or 5? If you have multiple people who are all feeling the pressure to try to find something, then it's going to continue to drive up the prices. I don't think it matters necessarily the number of people looking. Obviously, yes, the more people are looking, the more chances there are of people, bidding. But you're looking at 10 to 20% increase on the asking prices in many of these examples from the story.
Well, and who's buying these houses, right? I mean, that's another question, is what is taking place in terms of those that are looking to purchase them? Well, only 27% of existing home purchases in May were first-time buyers. Now, that's down from 31% a year earlier, according to the National Association of Realtors.
That just quickly, because I hear a comment, that surprised me. I would have thought first-time home buyers were like 60%. I mean, if we were on a quiz show and you said,
sure,
what percentage of home buyers are first-time home? I would say, probably 60, 70%. Really? 31% is the average, and it's down to 27. So we're seeing a drop because it is probably more expensive and you can't get the down payment. But that number alone just surprised me. I'm like, wow.
And millennials made up 43% of existing home buyers in the year ended in June 2021. Younger millennial buyers ages 23 to 31 paid a median purchase price of $250,000. Older millennials ages 32 to 41 paid a $315,000 median purchase price. Part of the reason I think this is important is, for those long-time listeners, you'd know that we've talked about housing historically on an ongoing basis. And I think, Lance, part of this, right, as we talked about home ownership rates among millennials are lower overall than previous generations, although they are finally catching up and making some ground. And there are consequences to that, right? We've also talked about the share of wealth in America and how at this stage in life, boomers and Gen X had more wealth than millennials have at the same stage in life. In other words, age for age comparison.
Right.
And part of that, I think, is reflected in you're seeing the percentage of home buyers, first-time home buyers that make up total home buyers, that has decreased, especially because of the tight market situation. And that's not necessarily a good thing that they only make up less than a third of all homes purchased are being purchased by people who are buying a home for the first time.
That is interesting, that because we've talked before, as you said, on other shows, and I've mentioned the fact that, having a home allowed me to refinance it twice, once for a business venture and once to help pay for my daughter's college, and while I'm still paying on it, which I, would have paid it off long time ago, it did allow me some freedom at a time when cash was needed and I didn't have it. And, obviously the idea is, and as you get older in many jobs, you make more money, than you do, or you just have inflation, so you make more money, but you've tied in your payment, right, at a lower level. So like when I was, first buying the house, I was hardly making any money. And that house payment was like 30%, 35% of my budget. But now I'm making more money and I've tied in that house payment for 30 years. And it's like, it's one of the lowest things that I pay for, now that when you reach a little bit older. And that's why, it's so important. People believe it's so important to buy a home is because, yes, it's hard up front, but as you age and as you get older, it becomes easier and easier to make that payment. And it gives you some flexibility in your finances as things come up. You can borrow against the equity in your home, or, you can refinance, or you can do this, that, or the other. And it's like, okay, I don't have to spend out of savings. I don't have to take a penalty and get some money out of my retirement account to do this. I can just, borrow some money against the house. And that's why it's so important. And I see that and I understand that. And it's tough when you're trying to make it and all of a sudden it's like hitting a moving target, right? The number keeps moving. Well, if I save this much money, and I think it mentions that in the article as well, that, okay, if you're going to put 20% down and you're going to buy a $350,000 house, you have to save $70,000. But then if you end up spending $400,000 on that house, now 20% is $80,000. Well, you had the money in savings, but guess what? Savings is paying less than 1%.
Right.
So you're not keeping up with the rate of inflation.
And the issue is that it's not necessarily that they don't want the houses. It is more difficult to obtain them, partly because, and this is what we'll leave you to think about here as we head into the benefits of ownership and then transitioning to talking some more about rent, is that principal and interest is a percentage of income. If we look at 2010, right, that stood at about 14%, okay? Principal and interest as a percentage of income for all homeowners was about 14%. It dropped all the way down to about 11% in 2013. And today it sits at 23%. Okay, 23%. So a much higher, not a little bit, not a couple points, it's much higher than it was in 2010 and has been lower than it was in 2010 between now and then. So it has not exceeded 18% until this year. Since 2010, it has never exceeded 18% until this year. So
right. That's an average, right? Because when I first started, mine was at like 30%, and now it's less than 10%.
Right.
The same mortgage payment 30 years later. So, but the average has more than doubled, which means
yes,
it's more of a pinch on people, especially when you go to the gas station and the grocery store and other places, and
all of that is more expensive.
Is more expensive. Exactly.
So let's talk about the value of home ownership. Lance has already shared a little bit about that, but what does the article tell us, and what difference is that going to make in the lives of Americans? And then how is that affecting the rental market? To find out, keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. A median American homeowner household needed 38.6% of its income to cover payments on a medium-priced home in March. That's according to the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. That was up from 32.6% at the end of 2021 and the highest level since August of 2007. Home ownership, according to the Wall Street Journal article, is a key wealth-building tool for the U.S. middle class. The median homeowner had $254,900 in wealth in 2019, compared with just $6,270 for the median renter, according to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances. And for all but the highest income households, their residential properties accounted for the bulk of their overall wealth, according to the First American Financial Corp. Homeowners also benefit from a favorable tax treatment because they can usually deduct the interest and property taxes paid on a personal mortgage. So I think about that, Lance. The difference here, the median homeowner had $250,000 in wealth in 2019 compared with $6,200 for the median renter.
I mean, that just shows the way the system is set up, right? I mean,
we want people to buy houses.
Our system is set up to buy a house because, home ownership is, throw a new phrase at you, is an economic multiplier. If you own a home, it creates jobs in multiple places. Like right now, as we speak, I have an electrician in my home who's repairing a couple of outlets and fans in our house, right? So me owning a home has now created a job in another market. And, oh, wait a minute, they're replacing a ceiling fan. So somebody had to buy the ceiling fan. So the ceiling fan company is making money. Oh, wait a minute, I bought that ceiling fan from a store and the store employee had to check me out. So me buying that ceiling fan employed somebody at the local hardware store to check me out. Oh, wait a minute, I use my credit card. So now somebody at the bank has to process that through and receive my payment at the end of the month. So see, economic multiplier. 4 or 5 people are now employed partially because I owned a home and bought a ceiling fan and needed to have an electrician come in and install it and repair some other things, along with all of the wiring and the conduit and everything else that he's going to use to replace that. So we set it up in our system, in our economic system, that to own a home, it's like buying a car, right? Owning a home, buying a car are economic multipliers. They create jobs in other industries because we buy those things. And so it's a very important part of how our economic system works for people to own homes.
Well, you might say, we talk about the law of supply and demand on this, right? So if it's so important that people buy these homes, if these economic multipliers show us that that's an important wealth building tool, not just for the person who owns the home, but also economically, then wouldn't simple logic dictate that we should just build more homes and then, the prices would go down and there'd be more availability, so prices wouldn't cost so much? Well, the article tells us that home builders, Lance, have been ramping up activity in the past 2 years, but that building has been slow due to the many supply chain issues around the world and labor shortages. And so there's that issue of, yes, I think builders would like to ramp up production, but they have to have 2 things, right? They have to have the materials, which they're struggling with, and they have to have the people to actually build the homes, which we've been talking about, I think, now for a few years, ever since, we had the Committee for Economic Development on, and they started sounding the alarm on the labor shortage, and we talked about the importance of trades, right? Trade-based jobs like construction, for example, are in desperate need of more people, and a lot of those jobs pay pretty well, but everybody's having that challenge, but especially your trades, which is part of why, I'm sure that Lance is paying a premium for this electrical work that he's having done.
Well, and I've waited 6 weeks.
Right.
We made the initial call to the electrician 6 weeks ago, and it's taken them 6 weeks to get the parts and to get out and find time to put us on the schedule to come out and fix it. And I remember never was like that. You called your, electrician, and in 24, 48 hours, they were out there and they had the part on the truck, and they were just, it doesn't work that way anymore. You've got lead time, you've got, their hours, they're stretched thin, they don't have as many people employed or whatever. And you're right. And so what does that do to the cost? And that, it makes it go even higher.
So let's talk about how this is impacting rent, Lance, right? Because we've talked a lot about homes, the value and importance of them, and that's great. But people at different stages in their life want to rent for different reasons. Take, for example, we talked a little bit about in this article, right? The people that are waiting to buy their first home are probably renting. And as rent prices go up, they're affected by it. But it's not just them, because you've talked about, that you and your wife might think about, well, maybe we sell our home and we go, live in a rental property. But then again, while it would be an attractive time to probably sell your home, it's not really an attractive time to try to go rent something, is it?
Right. And the idea is, you have in many of these cities in the United States, for example, the highest being Austin, Texas, rent prices have gone up 50%. So
50%.
50% from a year ago.
From a year ago.
Right. Nashville, Tennessee
is a pretty big jump.
Nashville, Seattle, Cincinnati, Ohio, and Miami, Florida are all at 30% increases in 1 year. And this is, I'm just going to throw this out there and then you take it wherever you want. The opening of the article, the opening paragraph, I have never heard of this before. People are now, when they go to fill out a renter's application,
yes,
they are actually putting down, oh, you want $1,200 a month for this apartment? I'll pay you $1,500. They're actually offering more than what the renter is asking for, what the owner is asking for. What? I mean, it makes me want, I've got 2 entrances to my house.
Yeah.
Right. I'm thinking of building a wall and I'll rent the other half.
For this kind of money, right?
You kidding me? But I mean, to me, that was shocking, that to get a place to rent, people are actually putting down more money than the owner of the property is asking for to try to get in and get the place.
I think that, honestly, probably from this article was the thing that really just, I mean, it should be shocking, right? That, well, rent prices in, where was it? The first place?
Austin, Texas is up 50%.
Right. Up 50%. Cincinnati's up 30%,
Right.
I mean, yes, that is shocking and amazing, but the whole notion of, I just can't even fathom that. Like, I think about when Brett and I were going to rent, our first apartment, it's like, what do you mean you're like the rent? Like, that's what it is. Like, you don't negotiate, it's like, this is the rent. And it's just so bizarre now that it's like, nope, now there are bidding wars to pay more in rent. Which is back to that point of landlords are raising prices. I mean, their prices are going up, but they raise prices and it's like, I don't care if you can't pay it. I mean, because I got 20, 30, 100 other people who would be happy to try to pay it,
Instead of begging people to, fill out an application and rent the place you have because it's sitting empty and you're not making any money off of it at all, you're getting more than you even asked for. To me, that's crazy. Something's out of whack here when that happes.
Yep. I think it's, it really just, it's phenomenal. So what do we do about that? What do we do about these changes? And what does that mean for where things are at in the country? Well, that's a complicated question. But that doesn't dissuade one Mr. Lance Jackson or Justin Weller from taking this on. So keep it here on The State of Us, and we're going to try to do just that. I believe the year was 2015, Lance, and I was moving with Brett into an apartment in downtown Cincinnati. So we're talking, 7 years ago, right? Now we had lived in an apartment before that, but it was out in a suburb of Cincinnati, and it was the top floor of like a house, you know, so not really comparable. But we were moving into downtown, and we were paying the base price was $950 a month. Now that did not include electric; it did include water. It did not include parking either. We paid another $200 a month because we had 2 cars to park both of our cars. So what? $1,150 a month, right? Realistically, I mean, that's what we were paying
for about what, 700-800 square feet.
Ooh, I think that's generous.
Okay. I mean, I was only there once, and it was very nice, and it was well located, but it was really small.
It was really small.
And so when you talk about the monthly payment, you were renting a very small square.
It was
footage.
A studio apartment. I mean, just to be clear.
So it's probably more like 550, 600 square feet.
Yes.
Because one of my daughters rented a studio apartment in Greensboro, North Carolina, right out of college. And I think it was 500 or 550 square feet for a studio apartment.
So you're talking about, I mean, what, somewhere between like $300 and $400 more a month with a 30% increase. And I'm just thinking about, like, I'm going back to that time and thinking about how that would have changed things. Well, for example, that could be the difference between buying a used car, right? Like you need a new car and you're going to go buy a used one and you're going to get a loan. And now you cannot do that because what you would have been putting toward that, I mean, we're talking $300 or $400 a month, right? And I mean, for a lot of people, to your point, if they're not getting a really substantive raise at work, that just has to come out of the existing pot, right?
Well,
so
what happens
other
to your
things
savings?
have to give.
Right. What happens to your savings account or a retirement account?
Right.
You know, I'm going to put, $100 in a, retirement account. I'm going to put $100 in my savings account. Oh no, I got to use that.
No, I'm not doing that.
I just got to do that to pay my rent. So now I have no savings account for a rainy day, and I'm not investing in my retirement account, which means, and we can all talk about that, but diminishing returns here, because when you are in your 20s and 30s is when you should be putting that money away because it has a longer time to earn money for you. I know the stock market's down now, folks, and everything.
That's perfect time to put it in.
This is when you should be buying, right? I mean, if you believe in that stuff, right? If you believe in the system,
if you believe in that hokey pokey,
right? Well, it is a belief system. It is, because we talk to many young people, who. And this is going to be an upcoming show, so stay tuned. Should we get rid of student debt? I mean, I got to get rid of my student debt. I can't pay that. And, this is all bad. We all need to get money for breathing. We need universal basic income and we need free college and we need this because it's so expensive. I think
we need to bring a Gen Z on for that one.
That's what I mean by, do you believe it or not? Right?
Yeah, I know.
Because we believe in one economic system, and there are young people that are looking at it and like, yeah, to your point from the first segment of the show, they can't participate in the system. So why should they believe in it? Which I think is important when we talk about, well, what do we need to do about it? Because I think a lot of people would say, well, nothing. I mean, it's, hey, c'est la vie, or whatever we can. That's your problem, not mine. I'm doing okay. So, but folks, we need to, because what's happening is, when you talk to these young people, they don't believe in the same system that I do. They think it's rigged. They think it's fixed. They don't see that they're ever going to be able to participate. And so they're asking for major changes to be made. So if you do believe in this system that we have, we need to address some of the inequities and do something about this. I'm not sure what that is necessarily, but I think we need to listen to them and discuss some of these things and issues that they have and see if we can find some areas to improve it, or otherwise the system that those of you who agree with me that we believe in is going to take a hit.
Yeah. So what do you do about it? Right. I mean, that's sort of what we're talking about is, how do you fix, because we've been talking, this is not like this is a new thing. Obviously it's a problem that's gotten worse, but housing affordability, is a major concern, especially in larger metropolitan areas. And we've been talking about for a while, well, what do you do about that? Right. Well, the basic law of economics tells us that we can increase supply, right? And in real estate, both rental and purchasing a home, location, right? I mean, we talk a lot about how much a property is worth. It very much depends on where it is located. And the reason I bring that up is because I think the one thing that COVID did bring us, right, that many workers discovered is all of these jobs that people have been doing that they suddenly realize, well, I don't necessarily have to be right next to my job all the time. I may need to go in every now and then. I may need to go meet with people. I may want to go meet with people and see people, but I don't necessarily have to go all the time. And I may be willing to live a little bit further away and make a little bit longer commute on the rare occasions that I do have to go in because I don't have to do it all the time. So as the flexibility and freedom to work in different locations continues to improve, I guess my contention would be we need to further improve that, right? And that's an infrastructure thing. Not just traditional infrastructure like roads, bridges, right? Yes, those, but also commuter infrastructure. For the country with the most rail in the world, the fact that we still have a stark lack of good high-speed passenger rail is just really, to me, very disappointing because, again, if you've studied history, if you've listened to the show, you would know that we've talked a lot about how rail really built this country in many ways. It was a huge part of what made our expansion and economic growth possible. And it's still an important part of the economy, but not nearly what it used to be. And partly because we haven't invested in innovating that. But the high-speed passenger rail is part of what will make it more feasible for people to not have to try to live the closer and more densely you pack people, the more expensive things become, And
along with that, we also need to, and we're getting some, but you talk about it, atypical infrastructure, hotspots and internet speeds and things like that, because as more people want to and are allowed to and can work from home or work out in middle America, you need the high-speed internets and the connectivity and the bandwidth and everything else that goes with that to be able to do your job so that your employer will keep you. Smaller towns and rural areas in the Midwest have encouraged people who have a job where they can work anywhere. Hey, come live in our town because rents are a third of what you're paying in New York City. And yeah, there are little things that we can do, but I do like your thing with, high speed rail, because then all of a sudden that 4 or 5 hour trip into the city in your vehicle and clogging up traffic and climate effects and everything else. Oh, wait a minute. We have a high-speed train, and you do have that on the East Coast. They're not high speed, but you do have some commuter trains on the coast. But we have nothing connecting the Midwest. And to your point, that's what built this country. People didn't start to expand westward in huge numbers until the railroads were built. Because then all of a sudden, they could get supplies and get back and forth and get what they needed.
Connectivity.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, yes, a very rudimentary form of it in comparison to something like the internet, but no less important at the time, absolutely
but
essential.
The same economic concept.
Sure. Well, and you also look at historically the importance of railroads and highways and how the government has used those existing easements to improve communication. I think, for example, the ability of the telegraph, right? And a lot of those were built where? Along railroads, because the government already had that property. And today, many of the underground lines that carry important information, either financial connections between some of the nation's federal banks and or internet lines, are buried where? Next to rail. So there's opportunities to upgrade those things simultaneously. But it is a question of you have to have the capacity to enable people to live. We have a big country, right? I mean, we have a lot of land, a lot of space, and we don't want to taper that with. That doesn't necessarily mean build 1 million more houses and take away, loads and loads of farmland. I'm not necessarily suggesting that, but I look at some of what's happening here in our small town and some of our neighboring communities. And one thing that's happening is that revitalization of old properties, programs that are designed to say, look, we have these existing buildings. A lot of them often the second, third, fourth floor, they're vacant. They're empty. There's literally nothing going on. And it's because they're in a state of disrepair. So how do we incentivize those to be repaired and repurposed to be reused again, rather than just say, let's build new? Let's make them more efficient and let's put people back in those places. And that way, you can start to see an impact on prices everywhere going down, right? Because if you shift some of the demand off of the big metros, then the prices in those areas will also reduce. While it's across the board, I think, hopefully bringing things down.
Well, and you just said it, basically to solve any problem, and this one in particular, you need to have some forward thinking, repurposing. I mean, we've never used this kind of building for, a living space before. Okay, well, what do we need to do that? You have to have some different thinking, some out of the box thinking to solve this kind of problem. And we're capable of that. We just have to address it. And I guess that was my point from my earlier rant, is that this is important, people, to keep our capitalistic society. We need to solve this. This is a major problem for us to solve if we want to keep what we have. Now, if there are those of you out there and you're the majority and you say, you know what, capitalism doesn't work and we need to go to something else, then let's just not do anything about this. But I don't agree with that. I think we can, fix the system, repair the system, and make it work for more people. I don't think we have to get rid of it and put in an entirely new system. I don't think that's a good idea.
So why do we have this conversation today, other than to ruffle some feathers, Lance, and get people riled up? Was there a reason that we tried to do all this?
Well, that's what we do every day, because we're trying to educate people, and that's our mission. And sometimes you ruffle people's feathers when you present them with things, and because when you educate them, you sometimes ruffle some feathers, and so that just happens. But now you're smarter, you learned, and now you can come up with some ideas. But we do that because through an honest and open and respectful conversation, and we've had that today, and we've laid out some things for you, and hopefully you enjoyed the show. And if you have some comments, good or bad, email us at podcast@thestateofus.org. We'd love to hear from you, and tell your family and friends what you heard today, and either roast us or pontificate us, whatever works for you. And but tell them they too can listen as a podcast to the show on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is heard Tuesdays and Thursdays, first thing in the morning, as a podcast. We can also be listened to on AM and FM radio stations across the country on the weekends. Lance takes the win today on the word of the day.
Hit it out of the park. That sends free zone through my body.
For The State of Us, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to Bradley Butch, our producer, and thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.